Europe, 1814. The continent is divided. Reeling after Napoleon's defeat and the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the heads of state of all major European nations are at odds. According to the terms of the First Treaty of Paris, the leaders of almost every European nation meet in Vienna to redraw the map. The Congress of Vienna was a turning point because it changed the map of Europe and changed the very fabric of international diplomacy.
Like the state of most places after a war, how do we put things back together? And do we really want it back together the way it was before, or shouldn't we leave some of the things that got done?
Since 962 AD, the Holy Roman Empire had dominated continental Europe. The abdication of the last emperor, Francis II, in 1806 began the disintegration of what had once been the mightiest power in the world. A short time later, on May 30th, 1814, Napoleonic France signed the Treaty of Paris, surrendering in totality to the Sixth Coalition, exiling Napoleon, and effectively ending France's status as the dominant power on the continent. The disappearance of these major powers proved problematic for the rest of Europe. While the problem of reappropriating territory now presented itself, there was also the issue of France, which many feared would restart its aggressive campaign of military force across Europe following Napoleon's dramatic return from exile in 1815. In September of 1814, the Congress began, and all of the powers of Europe sent delegates to Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna to foster the reorganization of the chaotic Europe Napoleon had left behind. However, the meeting was far from the strict and ordered image of diplomacy that comes to mind. Far from being a solemn round-table discussion, the Congress was more or less a dinner party, with a side of diplomacy. All involved were afraid of the possibility of France regaining Napoleonic levels of power, so they created equally strong border states such as the Netherlands and the Italian Kingdom of Piedmont. Restoring Germany as the chaotic, fragmented Holy Roman Empire served no one's purposes. Instead, the relatively large kingdoms of Bavaria, Württemberg, and Saxony remained as Napoleon created them. However, the smaller states were also left untouched, and no unified Germany would emerge from the Congress. The future of Napoleon's Polish Grand Duchy of Warsaw remained the most problematic issue. Tsar Alexander I of Russia had desired the territory for years, but Austria and Prussia both held parts of the old Polish kingdom and had no intention of letting Alexander take the whole area. The Prussians entered an agreement with Russia, under which Russia would support Prussia's bid for Saxony, and Prussia would support Russia's bid for Poland. In addition, Prussia would hand over its share of Poland to Russia. Austrian statesman and chairman of the Congress, Prince Clemens von Metternich, however, feared that Russia would become too powerful in this deal. To combat the alliance of Russia and Prussia, on January 3, 1815, Metternich, Viscount Castlereagh of the United Kingdom, and Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord of France signed a secret treaty agreeing to oppose the Prussians and Russians. This agreement represented a meeting of three of the most charismatic members of the Congress. Metternich, although an exceedingly arrogant man, proved himself to be a deft negotiator and a powerful force against the ambitions of Alexander.
Metternich had an ego that was, well, maybe all many statesmen need big egos. He supposedly said, I look in the mirror every morning and I say to myself, Metternich, how very, very right you are.
Alexander, the only monarch to personally attend the Congress, used the opportunity to attempt to expand his territorial interests in the east, but was largely rebuffed. Over the course of the meetings, Périgord had proven himself to be an extremely skilled, yet controversial, negotiator.
And it was really somewhat daring for him to come to Vienna because it was his country that had caused all the commotion. And how does Talleyrand handle that? He just looks at these delegates who are there. Why are you here? And Talleyrand said, I'm here because I represent France.
Tasked with representing France, he managed to ally himself with negotiators such as Castlereagh and successfully minimized the penalties inflicted on his country. In the end, the Congress of Vienna created a small Poland with Alexander installed as the king. With Russia satisfied, Prussia lost its ally and was only able to get a minor piece of Saxony. After Napoleon's return from Elba, his last-ditch effort for conquest, and his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, the Congress could return its attention to policy. Tsar Alexander I, still looking for a collective security system that would prevent anyone from ever building such a large European empire again, convinced most European nations to sign a Holy Alliance. Under the terms of this agreement, which was taken seriously by few besides Alexander himself, the nations promised to strive for the Christian virtues of charity and peace.
The Congress of Vienna was convened in 1815 by the four European powers that defeated Napoleon. The first goal of the Congress was to establish a new balance of power in Europe which would prevent imperialism on the continent. The second goal was to prevent political revolutions and maintain the status quo.
These diplomats who came to Vienna wanted to make Europe safe for the conservative outlook that had dominated their lives. And to some extent, they were indeed successful.
After the Congress, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which included Holland and Belgium, were created to confront France with stronger powers to the north and east. When that arrangement collapsed and an independent Belgium was recognized, the great powers accomplished their objectives by signing a treaty among themselves in 1837, which guaranteed the neutrality of Belgium and Holland. The second goal, to restore legitimate or traditional government to power and to prevent political revolutions, or to maintain the status quo, met with partial success in the short term, but was bound to fail in the long term because it opposed the irresistible forces of historical change resulting from modernization. Those irresistible forces took the form of dual revolutions of liberalism and nationalism. Political autonomy in Polish areas of the Russian Empire was initially encouraged by the Tsar Alexander I. When by 1830 the Polish moved farther in the exercise of local autonomy than the Tsar would permit, their independence movement was crushed by the Russian army. Belgian people in the Kingdom of the Netherlands resented Dutch discrimination against them and rose up in a struggle for independence in 1829. In 1837, the great powers recognized the independence of Belgium and accomplished a continuing restraint of French expansion by agreeing to a treaty guaranteeing the neutrality of the Netherlands and Belgium. There was not another European-wide war for a century. When Germany marched into Poland in 1914, thus violating the neutrality of the lowlands, the First World War began. The overthrow of King Charles X in France in 1830 was not opposed by the great powers. The king had adopted a reactionary policy which sought to undermine fundamental changes wrought by the French Revolution. This was to restore the aristocracy to exclusive rule. This was unrealistic and provoked unified opposition by the middle and working classes. The king fled into exile and the assembly invited a new monarch to the throne, King Louis-Philippe of the Orleans family. Though the workers had joined in the rebellion, they gained nothing from it. The assembly was dominated by middle-class elements. There were high property qualifications for voting or holding elected office. The Revolution of 1830 was not truly a revolution. It was merely a coup d'etat which preserved the political power of the upper middle class, which they had achieved as a result of the French Revolution.
Well, it was a turning point because it created a definite map of Europe that, to a large extent, survived.
After a brief but stormy reign, marked by an era of unprecedented violence, Napoleon left behind a continent in such deep chaos that it seemed to many to be an inescapable quagmire. However, out of this mess came a triumph of diplomacy. For the first time, the mightiest countries in Europe met in pursuit of a common goal: healing their continent. The Congress of Vienna was a turning point because it established a precedent for international diplomacy that has lasted the ages. It innovated the UN-style meeting of minds, of leaders, and without it, our world would surely be a very different place today.
That when the truth is told that you can get what you want or you can just get old, you're gonna kick off before you even get halfway through. Ooh, when will you realize Vienna waits for you?